Okay, in the last video, we talked about the CNS, or central nervous system, which included the brain and spinal cord, and we also talked about the reflexes, how they work to help us respond to things that could do damage to our body, but respond in a faster way to help protect us before our brain even registers it might be hurtful. So now we're going to talk about the PNS. And the PNS stands for peripheral nervous system. We're introduced to it briefly in one of the earlier videos. We'll go into a little bit more detail here. So the PNS basically includes all of the neurons and nerves that extend from the central nervous system. So they connect the brain and spinal cord to receptors and effectors. They are bundled together to form nerves. So if you look, there's the brain and the spinal cord. So that would be the central nervous system. And all the other yellow radiating to and from, that is the PNS, peripheral nervous system. So it helps if you understand a little bit more about what nerves are. So we've talked about neurons and the three main types of neurons. Now we'll talk about the nerves. So if you look at this picture up here, a nerve is made up of bundles of nerve fibers, which are really bundles of neurons. So if you look, here's this little square is showing neuron. A whole lot of neurons together form a nerve fiber. Okay, and then a bunch of nerve fibers together within a special, almost like a wrap, is called a nerve. Okay, so there's connective tissue that holds them together, and they have their own blood supply, because all cells, if you remember, all cells need to have nutrients and oxygen, and we need to be able to get rid of carbon dioxide and waste. So, just like sensory neurons, we have sensory nerves, and they have together the same kind of role as sensory neurons. Okay, so sensory nerves are basically bundles of sensory neurons. So they carry impulses from the receptors to the CNS, so to the spinal cord and brain. Take them from our sensory receptors. So if you think of your eye, then there's sensory nerves that take the information from the receptors in your eye to part of your brain that will look after your vision. Okay, we have motor nerves, so they're made up of bundles of motor neurons, which carry impulses from the CNS, so from the brain and spinal cord, to the effectors. Okay, and the effectors, if you didn't watch the early ones, the effectors are just simply the muscles and the glands and the parts of the body that actually will bring about a response. Okay, so they carry the message to them and tell them basically what they need to do. We also have what we refer to as mixed nerves. And mixed nerves are kind of like two-way communicators. Okay, so they carry sensory information from receptors to the CNS, and they carry motor information from the CNS to the effectors. So they have both types of nerve fibers. So if you were looking at one and maybe this one is sensory and the other one beside it is motor. Okay, so it has information going in both directions. One of the objectives for this chapter is to try to understand the difference between cranial nerves and spinal nerves. Sure. So, we have 12 pair of cranial nerves. So you may have played the game Cranium before, but you've probably heard the word at least. Your cranium refers to your brain. So, these nerves extend to and from the brain. Okay, so they serve sense organs and other structures in the head. So they will carry sensory information from the sensory organs to the brain and motor information from the brain to the different parts within your head. The ones that serve the eyes, nose, and ears, since they are sensory organs, would be mostly sensory. It's kind of hard to write this. Okay, sensory. The rest are a mix of both sensory and motor fibers. So I don't expect you to know all these. Okay, there's 12 pair, but at this level we're just looking to help you understand the difference, that there's cranial ones and there's spinal ones, and maybe that you start recognize a few. Okay, so in your eye and ear lab, you learned about the optic nerve. Okay, so the optic nerve carries sensory information from the rods and cones of the eye to the part of your brain that helps to interpret sight. Okay, you learned about what some of you may have named it the auditory nerve, so it depends which resource you were using. Okay, but the auditory nerve is really made up of the vestibular nerve and the cochlear nerve. So there's two branches, and so when it's all together in connective tissue, we call it the vestibulocochlear nerve. Okay, because it branches. It has two branches. So that carries information. The cochlear would be information for hearing, and the vestibular is to do with your balance. Okay. We have an olfactory nerve, and your olfactory sense is your sense of smell. Okay. And then there are some others that if you look at the name of it, it should give you a good idea of what they do. Okay, so the oculomotor nerve, for instance. Oculo refers to your something to do with your eye. Motor would be it's going to help it move. So it looks after certain kinds of movements, whereas you have other nerves that look after other types of movements in the eye as well. Facial motor. Okay, it's going to your face and it's looking after movements, so muscles of the face. Okay, so just to help you understand where some of the names are coming from. Okay, so the other type are spinal nerves, so they don't pass through the brain. Okay, so they are nerves connected to the spinal cord, and they don't go to or from the brain. There's 31 pairs, so obviously we're not going to expect you to know the names of them at this level, but each pair serves a specific part of the body, and they're all mixed nerves. Okay, so when we talked about the cranial nerves, there's some sensory, there's some motor, and there's some that are mixed. But spinal nerves are only mixed nerves, so they all carry both sensory and motor bundles. Okay. Earlier, you learned some of the basics of the PNS, the fact that it's made up of two branches. So there's the somatic nervous system and there's the autonomic nervous system. Okay, the somatic nervous system involves both sensory and motor neurons. Okay, so it's got nerves that carry sensory information and nerves that carry motor information. Whereas the autonomic nervous system involves motor neurons only. Okay. The somatic nervous system connects the CNS to your skin, to your skeletal muscles, and to other sense organs. Okay, so if you think about it, if it's connecting to your skin and your other sense organs, then it makes sense that it has sensory nerves. Okay, if it's connecting to your skeletal muscles, those are the muscles that you use when you walk and when you talk, the ones that are attached to your bones, and they help for movements that you tend to think of. Now, some of them don't tend to think of or have to direct with thought input anymore if they're things like walking or riding a bike or whatever, because we have a kind of memory that develops that allows us to do things after so many times of repeating it over and over. It allows us to do it without thinking about it anymore. But if something happened to that memory part of your brain, you'd have to relearn it. Okay? So it's still what we call a voluntary movement. Okay, ones that you have to think about and you can control. But we can come to the point where they're almost automatic because we've done it so many times. Okay, but it's still considered a voluntary movement because you can kind of slow it down and think about it and think about every movement and make your muscles move a certain way when you're doing it. Okay, so these little graphics are just to kind of help you remember what kind of things the somatic nervous system looks after. So hearing and sight, taste, touch, temperature, all those things would be sensory, and then your body movements would be the motor part. When we say autonomic, it's really close to the word automatic. So if you think of that, but no, it's really autonomic, then that will help you remember that this system is what looks after the movements that you really don't think about, and you don't have to tell your body to do. Okay, your brain doesn't have to tell it to think about it and tell it what to do. Okay, so it connects to your internal organs, to the smooth muscle. There's 3 types of muscle. One is skeletal muscle, which is looked after by the somatic nervous system. Another is smooth muscle, so that's the kind of muscle that, say, is around the outside of your blood vessels, or it is what's around your digestive tract. Okay, and also cardiac muscle. Okay, and that's the muscle of your heart. So the autonomic nervous system looks after things that are involuntary, so no thought required. Things like your heart beating and your blood flowing through your vessels, your breathing, swallowing, the peristalsis or movement of food along your digestive tract. All those things will be looked after by your autonomic nervous system. Okay, the autonomic nervous system is further divided into 2 branches. So we have the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Okay, so what they have in common, they're both parts of the autonomic nervous system, so they both work through motor neurons, motor nerves that are attached to internal organs. Okay, so the organs of the autonomic system actually have nerve endings from both of these branches, and they work opposite each other, so they're kind of like on-off switches. Okay, if one speeds something up, the other slows it down. And so together they help to regulate the different internal organs. Okay, so because they work opposite each other, we call them antagonistic. Okay, the sympathetic nervous system, you can look at some of these here, but the sympathetic nervous system is the one that comes into play or is activated during our fight or flight response. Okay, you've probably heard that before, during our stress response. So if maybe someone came up to you with a gun and they were holding the gun to you and wanted whatever you had, or maybe you came across the scene of an accident, or maybe it's something as simple as you see that cute person walking down the hall and you're kind of, you get all nervous and worked up. Okay, those feelings that you get are because of, or the things that you can feel happening in your body are because of the sympathetic nervous system. So, your heart, what would your heart do? Okay, if you come across a scene of an accident, you feel it beating harder. Okay, or your breathing, you breathe a little deeper, a little faster. Okay, your airways actually open up so that you can get lots of oxygen to your brain and your muscles. Okay, your pupils dilate, means that they get bigger so that you can take in more of what you see around you, so that you know, okay, if I need to run somewhere, if I need to do this or that, I know what to do. Okay, take in information from the surroundings. So it focuses your blood flow towards the organs that you need the most then, too. It sends the blood towards your brain more and your muscles, because you may have to run. You may need to lift something really heavy. So there have been people who've lifted a car off of someone, and they're able to do it because of this nervous system kicking in. Okay? Causes the production of, well, what we call epinephrine, or the other name for it is adrenaline. Okay, so that's where we get that rush, that adrenaline rush, that feeling of, oh, I can lift this, I can do. Sometimes it gives you that ability to do things that you wouldn't normally be able to do. Okay, but it does inhibit things like digestion. Okay, because you don't want to waste your energy at that time breaking down your food stuff, when what you really need to be doing is putting all your energy into your brain and your muscles and being able to respond to the situation. The parasympathetic, if it's the opposite, we say it is working when your body is resting and digesting. Okay, so, and it does the opposite thing. So it causes your pupils to constrict, makes them smaller again. It stimulates the flow of saliva and the functioning of your digestive tract, because your body's kind of resting and it's able to break down your food and perform some of your regular normal tasks. It slows your heart rate and it slows your breathing and it constricts your airway to normal size, okay, not as open. So those are some of the things. They're antagonistic, that's the word. Okay, so this further compares the two branches of the autonomic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system, it works by releasing norepinephrine at the synapse. Okay, epinephrine, we said, is the same thing as adrenaline. So norepinephrine means noradrenaline. Okay, they have very adrenaline, and they end up causing release of adrenaline as well. Okay, it generally prepares your body for emergencies, fight or flight feelings, and getting you ready for, if you had to respond in that situation. So things like we already said, increasing your heart rate, your breathing rate, dilating your pupils, focusing the blood more towards the key organs like your brain and your muscles and away from your digestive tract. So, while the sympathetic nervous system releases norepinephrine, the parasympathetic releases acetylcholine at the synapse. Okay, and the synapse is just the space between neurons and between neurons and effectors. Okay, so these nerves would release acetylcholine, that space between the neurons, or at the end when they're trying to direct an effector muscle. Okay, they generally promote, what you said, resting and digesting. Okay, so they do the opposite. Slow down your heart rate, slow down your breathing rate, constrict your pupils, and so on. This is just a diagram from your book. It's a little more complicated than the one that I showed you earlier, but it shows the same kinds of things, comparing and contrast the two systems. So, you should have this handout, or you can print it off from the website. It's a good little organizer or study tool to look at the branches of the nervous system and comparing and contrasting them. You could take and look at them and then make yourself up, compare and contrast, list some similarities, list some differences between some of the different branches. And that's a good way of studying. So if you pause it, take a few minutes and see if you can fill it out. It'll be a good review. Okay, so, oops, I like using color better. I can't write that all using this, so let's see. I'll try this instead. Okay, so the human nervous system is made up of two branches. If you look and work backwards, this branch interprets sensory information, controls most body activities, connects the PNS with the brain, and controls reflexes. So this must be the central nervous system. Okay, so the CNS. And if you're writing this on a test, you have to make sure, you have to imagine that I know nothing about biology. Okay, pretend I know nothing. So the first time you ever write it, you really should say what CNS stands for. You can't assume that other people always know what it means. So make sure first time you write it on a test that you explain what your shorthands mean. So the part of the CNS that interprets sensory information and controls most activities, right, is the brain. And the part that connects the PNS with the brain and controls your reflexes is the spinal cord. Yep. The other branch of the nervous system is PNS, the peripheral nervous system. And it is comprised of two branches. One, it's this one on the left. If it has both sensory and motor neurons and looks after muscles that are looking after voluntary movements, so they're under voluntary control, this must be the somatic nervous system. The one that has only motor neurons and looks after involuntary movements, so it controls smooth and cardiac muscle, not the skeletal muscle, that would be the autonomic nervous system. And if we break the autonomic nervous system down further, then we have sympathetic and parasympathetic. And one way you can keep them straight, you can think S, S is for sympathetic and S is for stress. So the one that's involved in the stress response or the fight or flight response is the sympathetic nervous system. The one that's active when you're resting and digesting, that is the parasympathetic. Change. Doing funny things. Anyway, there we go. Okay, so that is kind of a little review chart that will hopefully help you when you're studying the nervous system. Next video sections we go into more detail about how the actual message, so the electrochemical message, how it travels through your nervous system.